Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We will begin in 3 minutes. Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We are ready to begin. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 contact hour. Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing is accredited as a provider of continuing nursing education by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. The speakers and planning committee members have disclosed no conflicts of interest. To receive contact hours for this CNE session, participants are required to attend the webcast and complete the evaluation form, which will be emailed to all attendees approximately 1 day after the webcast. This webinar is being recorded and will be available via the Sigma repository within a few business days of recording. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. You'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel that you can send a message through the questions feature. This is where you can type in any question you'd like to pose to the presenters. Be sure to hit send so the message makes it to us. To test out this feature, please submit the state or country you are from. We would like to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us today. Our speakers are Dr. Larry Slater, Vincenza Coughlin, Mary Ho, and Michelle Young. Dr. Slater is the Director of Undergraduate Programs at NYU Rory Myers College of Nursing. He received his BSN and PhD from the UAB School of Nursing, where he has also completed postdoctoral training focused on psychosocial aspects of aging with HIV. He is an expert in technology, enhanced education, and alternative teaching strategies. He is a certified nurse educator and has received awards from peers and students for his teaching. Vincenza Coughlin is a nursing professional development specialist for orientation and preceptorship at NYU Langone Health Tisch. Vincenza received her baccalaureate and master's degree in nursing education from the NYU Rory Myers College of Nursing. She is certified in nursing education, maternal newborn nursing, and lactation counseling. Vincenza is a member of Sigma and has previously served as chapter secretary. Mary Ho is the nursing professional development specialist at NYU Langone Health. Mary's background is in pediatrics and pediatric critical care, but she has been working in the education department for the past 2 years. Michelle Young is the nurse residency coordinator at Hendricks Regional Health. She has over 20 years of experience in newborn intensive care and adult recovery room nursing. She has her master's in nursing education and for the last 8 years has focused on passionate, innovative, and engaging in educational modalities. She has created and implemented 2 nurse residency programs in the greater Indianapolis area. Now let's go ahead and get started on tonight's presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you this evening. I know we have people from around the country and around the globe that are with us today. And as we get started, we just want to highlight that a lot of what we're going to be talking about may be a little bit North America centric in terms of licensing for us in the United States and Canada, but hopefully we'll also be providing some information that can be helpful for some of our colleagues around the globe that might be finishing up nursing programs and looking to enter the workforce as well during this era of COVID-19. For my part, I'm going to kick us off by talking about your completion of your nursing program. We geared this towards those that are graduating this semester or may have just graduated, or those that might be graduating in the summer. But some of these can also apply to people that may graduate after the fall semester. We do not know how long some of these changes will keep going, so we will have to think about how the NCSBN and states and boards of nursing adjust on the fly as we continue to see how we are handling this pandemic. But keeping that in mind and thinking about those that are graduating now or might graduate in the summer, I'm going to look at three different things before we then pass it on to the next step, which is looking at you in terms of the job market, finding those first jobs and what to expect as you start a new job in this era of COVID-19 and what that's going to look like as you begin. So to look at the first part and your graduation, first off, congratulations on making it through your nursing program, finishing up this semester or in this summer. You have come a long way. You've learned a lot. And let's just be honest, it's been a very interesting end to your nursing education for all of us having to go remote as we conclude our programs. In terms of your graduation, being ready for graduation and being able to sit for licensure, all of our states have worked really hard with our programs throughout the state to ensure that our graduates are meeting the appropriate competency requirements. So as such, in every state, all of your nursing programs have worked with your state boards of nursing to, in some instances, apply or provide documentation for alternative learning experiences to make sure that you are ready to graduate and can sit for that NCLEX. Do remember that all of us, no matter where we are in this virtual environment. So while myself, who's in New York, may have different expectations from our students in terms of how the end of their program looked to individuals in Indiana, where Michelle is, or people in California, or if we're looking at Quebec and for our NCLEX takers that take it in French, we all have different requirements, but we're all in the same boat. And I do think our licensing bodies do understand that we are all in the same boat, and we are in desperate need of you to graduate and to become the next generation of nurses that we so desperately need. So now that our states have approved our requirements for graduation, the next thing to think about is your transition into taking your NCLEX to get ready for licensure. I'm going to talk about licensure on the next slide. So in some instances, this may be a little backwards because there are some states that have given graduates the ability to look at temporary licensure and start working as a nurse without taking the NCLEX. And we'll talk about that when we get to licensure. But looking at the NCLEX, in and of itself, it was suspended for a few weeks. It did start back on March the 25th in certain areas throughout the country initially, and it has been expanding slowly since March 25th and when they did reopen. They do have to adhere to safety guidelines, so thinking about distancing and social distancing, being 6 feet apart, not having too many people in one location. They are looking at all the Pearson VUE and other testing sites at cleaning and how areas are cleaned. You also, by the way, are able to wear personal protective equipment. That is allowed and not something you need previous authorization to have, say, masks when you are taking NCLEX. So all that is available to you, but also in light of the current situation, trying to get people in and out of testing centers a little quicker was important. So the NCSBN did modify, and this current plan is through July 4th. That could change depending how the situation continues. But for the NCLEX, it is going to be a minimum of 60 questions. It used to be 75. And a maximum of 130, so not the 265. And the maximum time is 4 hours as opposed to the 6 hours for NCLEX. Takers used to also have the option to take the Next Gen NCLEX Special Research section, which they are not offering that at this point. One thing I would like to highlight is those that do get accommodations for testing, accommodations are still available. NCLEX can be taken up to a maximum of 2 4-hour sessions over a 2-day period for those that do have accommodations. So no worries there, you are able to get those accommodations. In terms of where you can take the NCLEX, it is kind of a mystery even to all of us. In talking to Pearson VUE or others, they really do keep it within the system so that when you are going online and putting your address and finding testing locations, it is the most up to date and in real time. So even I can't really look up and see in New York City unless I have one of my graduates going in while I'm sitting there with them to see which testing sites are open. Some states it might be easier to test in larger urban areas. You can imagine it might be easier to find a test than in some states and some rural areas. But just be patient. Know that you will be able to take your NCLEX, your licensing exam, and in some instances, you may be able to delay the taking of your licensing exam while you might be working as a nurse. The one thing that me as an educator wants to caution you about is even if you do start working as a nurse and are very busy beginning that first job and have a say don't need to take the NCLEX maybe until December. For some states, it's like 30 to 60 days after either the emergency declaration is over or through the end of the year, depending on how they did their statute and how they did their exceptions. You want to make sure that you still continue your preparation for NCLEX, that you don't let that slide, because we want to make sure that you do pass it the first time you do take NCLEX when you are able to do so. So looking at licensure, the last thing I'll talk about in just some basic sense, and you do see you're gonna have available to you these PowerPoints. All of these links here from the NCSBN can provide you with information. So this one in particular, looking at individual state responses and licensure, has a breakdown of each state, just some of the basics, and also links to the individual state Board of Nursing websites. I do encourage all of you to go to your state, your province, whatever your licensing board or responsibility is in terms of your Nurse Practice Act, to look specifically at your guidelines. And I've looked through a lot of the states in preparing for this, and you see a wide array of options for different states. And some of them are easy to find right on their main web page, and some of them are very difficult to find. So you do want to be working with your faculty and with your deans and directors to make sure you're all set in your particular state. But what we're seeing now in terms of licensure are a lot of different things. We see people jumping right into jobs right after graduation without having taken the NCLEX, again, having that waiver to be able to start work on a temporary license and then take that NCLEX at a later date after this emergency situation is a little more under control. You're seeing a lot of other emergency waivers for people that may have licenses in other states. So if somebody's in an RN to BS program, you already are licensed, but you may be trying to go into another state. And so most states now have some type of agreement where they will let you start working with a reciprocal license without having to finish the entire process of getting a license in that state. I can tell you myself, being in New York City, this has been imperative for people that we have brought into New York to help with our emergency response in this time of COVID. So again, be in contact or review your State Board of Nursing requirements, anything that has come out from your state legislatures, because a lot of the state legislatures have passed specific emergency measures that are going to address these types of temporary licensing. And then it's also up to you and your comfort and where you feel and how ready you feel in terms of looking for that first job and getting started, whether it is with a temporary license or whether you're looking at waiting until you take the NCLEX and then starting the job search after that. There are going to be jobs. Jobs are shifting at present, as you can imagine, with, for example, the shutdown of elective and maybe same-day surgeries. Some of those may be opening back up soon, so there might be high needs in those types of areas. When you're looking at acute care facilities, in some areas they have been swamped, as you can imagine. In other areas, not so much, where we have not seen COVID-19 hit yet. to date, although these facilities are still making emergency management plans should that become the case. So with that and some of these basics, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on first to Vincenza and Mary. We're going to talk a little bit about getting you ready for that first job and the hiring process. And they're going to give you some perspective from a city kind of urban area that is in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. And then we're going to hear from Michelle after that, who is in a facility that is ramped up and geared up and ready to go should the crisis hit on a much larger level. So I will pass it off to Vincenza and Mary.
Hi, everybody. This is Vincenza. So over the past few weeks, there have been several changes to the onboarding and orientation processes. As mentioned, Mary and I are nursing professional development specialists, and we coordinate, facilitate nursing orientation. So regarding the hiring process, we are still hiring, which is great. Everything is remote. So the HR department and other departments, as far as management, they're interviewing virtually. That includes WebEx, Skype, FaceTime. And, we look at this in the lens of past, present, and future. So this is our current status as far as what the future holds. There's potential that we can still virtually onboard, which is great. So another thing to consider is staff are hired for specific units, although the units that previously existed, such as a PACU, may not really exist as a PACU right now. There's been a lot of changes within the hospital, and Mary will touch more upon that. And so a PACU that was previously a PACU is now functioning as ICU. And it's something to consider when you are being hired, that there's fluidity in your clinical assignment. So you'll be, again, onboarded the same way, meaning you would start on your unit. However, the patient assignment would look a little different currently. And I'll pass it along to Mary to talk a little bit about the changes clinically.
Thanks, Vincenza. Yeah, we've had a really interesting past couple of months with orientation, and we've been able to showcase how flexible we are as nurses in light of all of these changes. So as Vincenza mentioned, some of the units that were, let's say, a PACU or an acute level care unit have now been changed to ICU level care. So you may have been hired for an acute care unit, and you might find that that unit is an ICU COVID unit when you arrive. And in the next couple of weeks, that same unit may transition back to the acute level care that it was previously. So right now, what we're seeing is that nurses are becoming very flexible in their new patient assignments and learning how to manage the current COVID population. We've also had a lot of nurses who previously worked in ORs or ambulatory centers who have now been trained to work in acute care or ICU level care inpatient beds. And so these nurses who you may be working alongside with once you start working on the unit, they may transition back to the ORs or to the ambulatory centers that they were previously assigned to. So the patient population will change, the types of units that we're working on will change, and also the composition of our coworkers will change over the next weeks to months. And we're realizing that while COVID, we're in the midst of it right now, there could be kind of a pendulum swing that in a couple of months may come back, and we might have to become more flexible in the future. We're also onboarding hundreds of travel nurses at our institution. So again, another level of complexity, working with a lot of different people, meeting people might be leaving in the next few weeks to months. We've had a difference in our practices in terms of caring for COVID patients. They're high acuity. And so we're finding that while there are new nurses coming to the bedside, they are in the same kind of learning phase as very experienced nurses and practitioners. So we're all kind of learning how to care for these COVID patients together because it is very new to all of us. And the last thing I'll talk about is PPE. Everyone has been there's been a large focus on PPE with COVID. And while we've always been mindful of it, because we want to, let's say we're going into a patient's room, they're on isolation for COVID, we want to make sure that we're cluster caring for our own efficiency. But what we're now finding is that we want to be efficient, but we also need to make sure that we're not using more PPE than we need. And so we're hyper conscious. Every time we walk into the room, we want to make sure that we have every single piece of equipment and supply so that we don't need to step out of the room to get anything. So that's been really a team effort, both in and out of the room. And it's been amazing to see everybody work together.
Hi, and this is Vincenza again. So I'll just talk about the nurse residency program. So as a new graduate, the nurse residents are within their first year oriented to the hospital environment. The nurse residency program has maintained structure, meaning new nurses are still being hired for the nurse residency program and the program seminars are still taking place. Again, this is virtual, so we have WebExes with our speakers and our presentations all remotely. Again, we want to provide opportunities for remote outside staying home participation, which has been great because we're able to still provide the knowledge and the experience through the nurse residency program, just in a different element. And Mary touched upon it. This is extreme resiliency. You know, we're working together, making the best of situations. And not only are we side by side on the units, but we're we're working in New York City. So we're out with other people really coming together, and it's really, really inspiring. So just wanted to give you insight that things are still moving along, just in a different realm. And I guess we could pass it to the next speaker.
All right, well, hello there. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the suburban and rural markets. We have wanted to talk about a little bit about what you're going to expect when you're looking for a job. You know, healthcare is always changing, and now is no different. Looking for a job is an exciting and scary time. With all that's happening in the world, I want you guys to imagine, I imagine that those feelings are palpable, but I want you also to acknowledge that those feelings that you're having and give them the respect that they deserve. Because, and once you do that, then you have to focus on taking care of yourself and your future careers. So hospitals definitely need you. They're, like they talked about, a lot of people have moved to virtual interviewing, several layers of phone interviews, different things like that. We too have had the same types of changes in our unit. So our PACU is also an ICU, even though we're obviously much smaller than the New York market. We still made a lot of changes to our facilities. A lot of nurses changed to lots of different departments. We had people from outpatient surgery helping on medical, and all different kinds of things have happened. We kind of had all hands on deck, so different departments have come to help, and that's really been beautiful to see everybody come together. But we still need you. We're still looking for new nurses. We are still hiring, and so we want you to continue to do that and look for jobs. We'll certainly take you in. We want you to advocate for yourself, though. One of the things I wanted to share tonight was really about how you can take care of yourself during this pandemic. Make sure that you find a hospital with a residency program to support you through your transition. Don't feel like you can just go anywhere. Definitely go somewhere where you can be supported. This is the beginning of your journey in your nursing profession. So don't allow the circumstances of the pandemic to rob you of the solid foundation that you're going to need to be successful in your career. Residency programs are amazing. They foster support, mentorship, building of essential nursing skills and knowledge that you're going to need for your career. Our facility canceled all of our classes except for the residency program because we know how important it is to continue to educate our nurses and get them prepared to be at the bedside. We actually have a 10-week skills rotation in our residency program where they rotate to 36 different units in our hospital to obtain skills. And we're still doing those rotations because we want the new grads to be confident and secure in their skills. So look for programs that are offering you, or look for hospitals that are offering you residency programs where you can have a good foundation. Also be sure your orientation is not shortchanged, right? The first thing I hear when the new grads start here at our hospital is like, am I going to be thrown to the wolves? No, you're not going to be thrown to the wolves. don't let yourself be thrown to the wolves. That's really my answer, but it won't happen at our hospital. But make sure when you're going to places that you're going to have an orientation that's not shortchanged. Make sure you have a residency program. You have to protect yourself. This is the beginning of your career. Some keys to success: flexibility is a must. In all aspects of nursing, this skill is something that you're going to have to master, because we always have to be flexible in nursing. So be flexible with your interviewing, be flexible with the hours you want to work, be flexible, if they say, hey, we know we hired you for medical, but we need some help over here, be flexible. Let those things happen, and you'll build a lot of respect with your coworkers and your peers. Emotional support, I think, is really important. It's really important for you to find your people. Find a group of people or a person who can support you emotionally through all that you're going to experience in your first year of nursing. Any seasoned nurse will tell you that you have to take care of yourself before you can successfully take care of others. So do that. Find your people that will help build you up and give you somebody to vent to and talk to you about all of that's going on. The beginning of your nursing career is really scary by itself, and now we're in the middle of a pandemic and you're trying to start your new job. So you're going to have so many emotions and so many things to go through. Find your people that you can talk through those things with and be there for you. And then perseverance. This is your time to shine. Show seasoned nurses that you're ready for the challenge of supporting them and working with them through this crisis. Show everybody that you're ready and willing to learn and be there for your patients. And then remember to give people grace. You're going to encounter some grumpy people. They're hot, they're tired, they're emotionally drained. Everybody's going through so many things right now. Give them some grace. Don't be upset if they're kind of grumpy. Support them. But also give yourself some grace, because we're all in this together. And I can promise you, we've got this, but we're going to need to do it together. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you, Vincenza and Mary. And for all of our attendees, we did want to keep our introduction short to save a lot of time for your many questions that you probably have. But I do want to wrap up with one thing. As Michelle said, you do need to advocate for yourself and make sure you're getting the orientation you need, the nurse residency that you need. But one thing I want to highlight is, you often hear that we say nurses eat their young and you're going to be worried about bullying and incivility, and that has been an issue. One thing that this pandemic has shown us is the imperative of working together. So both intra-professional within the nursing profession and interprofessional with all of the other healthcare providers and all the other frontline staff, how imperative that is. And I have seen so many wonderful things, and so have my graduates, with what we're seeing out there, with people working together, with people picking each other up, building each other up, supporting each other. And so I hope this one bright spot that may come out of this awful pandemic is the respect that we have for each other in the workplace. And so I think despite it being an era of a pandemic, you are walking into what we think, of course, is the greatest profession, which is nursing, in a time where we are seeing unbridled camaraderie and interprofessional collaboration and commitment. And it is a wonderful thing. And we want you to go out there on the front lines and continue what we see being started with your ability to teamwork, your ability to assess and prioritize, your ability to step in when needed. We are excited for you to be graduating and joining our profession during this absolutely imperative time. So with that, we are going to, now we have lots of time for any type of question from you're finishing your program, licensure, graduation, the NCLEX, onto the hiring process, the onboarding process, what your first job might look like, which Michelle said flexibility is the key. So any questions you have, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Hey, Larry, can you just remind us of which hospitals you work at? The audience was just asking which hospitals you each work at.
For me, I am an educator. I'm the director of undergraduate programs at the NYU Roy Myers College of Nursing, and I work with instructors and have students in hospitals all throughout the New York City area, from the Bronx, Manhattan to Brooklyn and Queens.
Mary and I work at NYU Langone Health Tisch, which is the Manhattan campus of NYU Langone Health.
And Michelle Young, I work at Hendricks Regional Health in Danville, Indiana. It's about 15 minutes west of Indianapolis.
Thank you. I have a question. If I postpone taking my NCLEX because I need to start working at the bedside, do you have any recommendations for how I should study for a later date, or do you have any resources that I should look to for help?
That is a great question, and I did say in the beginning, if you do go that route, that it is imperative that you keep yourself prepared. One of the hard things that you're going to realize is when you're taking NCLEX and you're doing NCLEX style questions, right? We can only kind of solve one real world problem at a time. We have to think about not pulling in from our own personal experiences, but looking at the question that's in front of us and attacking that STEM. So one of the difficulties we find in people that actually do start working and delay NCLEX is sometimes they bring a little too much real world experience into a computerized testing environment, if that makes sense. So one of the best things to do is, even while you're working, to spend time every day, if you have 5 to 10 minutes, and you're using a resource, like there are many, that programs use for NCLEX prep resources, and there are a lot of other NCLEX prep resources on the market, so I don't want to name them, but you probably know several that your peers have recommended, that you continue doing questions on a regular basis and you vary your content in those types of questions. And you don't also get stuck in thinking about just your niche that you end up working with, because your NCLEX, remember, is going to test you on all of it, on your maternity, your peds, your acute psych, even if you're working in a COVID ICU. So doing questions every day is one thing that I would recommend. And also just reviewing some of your basic resources, like some NCLEX prep books or something that give you nice bullet point breakdowns of all the important topics for all of the different avenues of nursing that you're going to have to understand and know about. But typically, as I said, what we find that students struggle with most going back to NCLEX is they're being a little too real world in that computer adaptive environment, and you have to keep that test taking skill up to pass NCLEX, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Larry, I'd like to, if it's okay, I'd like to add to that too. Just in terms of the NCLEX itself, I know that there are, several states that have required that you don't have to take the NCLEX to start working, but there are still individual hospitals who are still choosing to not go that route, and they're still requiring you to take your NCLEX. So it's not automatic that even though the state says you don't have to, the individual hospitals still have a choice on whether or not to allow that. And I know of hospitals that they're not desperate, that's so desperate for nurses that they're choosing to go that route. So just I don't want everybody to expect they can not worry about their NCLEX right now, because they may very well have to do that to get a job.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. I did mean to mention that in the beginning, and I am glad that you brought that back up. So this goes to the hiring process, right? And where you're looking for a job. Not only do you need to know what the state is requiring, you need to know what your potential employer is requiring to make sure that you're meeting the needs of that particular position as well.
Thank you. How do I find a hospital that believes in the things you guys are discussing?
Your Truville Health is hiring. You just look for it. You have to look. You ask them the questions when you have those interviews. You can just ask them. Ask them if they have residency programs. Ask them about their orientation program, and ask them if those things have changed during this time. Ask them what the expectations are of your orientation and what kind of support they're going to provide for you in your new journey.
Are there any tips for phone interviews?
I can go first. I'm not sure if somebody else wanted to jump in too, but one of the things we find in this remote world, that I'm remote teaching all the time now, and as you heard Vincenza and Michelle and Mary say, they're doing a lot of their training remotely and in virtual sessions. Background noise is critical. You need to really try to plan these interviews, and you want them to be professional as possible. I was speaking to somebody who was responsible for hiring that I know didn't hire somebody because they could tell they were washing the dishes. And so they're like, well, do they think this is that important that they can just be randomly washing the dishes while they're casually talking to me on the phone about a job, right? So you do need to treat it like an interview. And that is just the telephone part. So if we want to go dig a little further, and the others may have some tips as well, but if you're doing a Zoom interview or something that has video capability, you not only want to make sure you yourself are dressed appropriately, not in your pajamas. Make sure that you are dressed just like you would be there in person, but that the background around you is appropriate as well. You can imagine what some people might not realize is behind them on a screen. Now, we do realize in today's day and age, if a dog walks behind you, or if you are having to care for little kids and a kid happens to walk in the room, that's not as damaging, say, as inappropriate pictures or backgrounds behind you while you're doing an interview. And I'm not sure if any of our others out there have any additional ideas.
Hi, this is Vincenza. So, as I mentioned, our HR department is functioning as usual. They're just remote. So, as Larry mentioned, really having that dedicated time, if you have a set time for an interview, that you would still be there on time, come prepared just as you would in person. And like I mentioned, at least at our institution, we're doing Skype, we're doing FaceTime, where you get to see somebody. So be professionally dressed and appropriate.
How would you recommend asking about the PPE situation at certain hospitals during an interview?
I would just ask them. You want to ask them, you want to protect yourself and ask them how PPE is, how do you think your allocation of PPE is? Is this something we need to be concerned about? Ask them, how often it's replenished if they need it, and see what they say.
I think additionally, Vincenza or Mary or Michelle, in your residency programs, have you added any content that relates to use and donning and removing PPE as well in terms of the safety of your new grads?
We've provided, this is Michelle, we have provided that information, and actually on day one of hire, we provide everybody with a regular surgical mask and a 95 and a face shield. That's what they get first day when they walk in, because we want them to wear their surgical mask throughout the day.
Where can I check for the hospitals that have unions and nurse residency programs?
One of the best ways is to check with the hospital itself. There are many different nursing unions, and it's going to be very dependent by state. But I do find when you're looking at that, as well as residency programs, because there are many facilities that may say they have a residency program and talk a good game, but maybe their residency program isn't exactly what a new graduate nurse might need to prepare them. So if you are graduating and looking for a job in the same area, I find that your fellow alumni, your graduates that are now out there working, especially the ones that you might have known that graduated a year before, are going to be some of the best people to talk to. Hopefully your organization also does your program also does some like alumni panels where people can ask questions, but your graduates especially are going to be good resources, because they'll be the ones that are honest with you and say, yes, this facility said we were going to have a residency program that lasted a year, and after about 6 months it kind of petered out, but it was all okay, I felt prepared. Or they might say, yeah, this residency program was awesome. The 12 months I was in it, I learned so much. This is the project I did, and it really is having an impact on patient care. So check them out. It's a little harder if you are I have a lot of graduates, say from NYU, that are from California or from Washington, just as an example. So they didn't finish school in the area, so they don't have as many alumni to draw from to understand those experiences. In that instance, it is going to be, as Michelle said in the beginning, or with one of the questions, you need to interview them just as much as they're interviewing you when you're looking at those jobs. And these are the types of questions in the list that you want to have prepared to ask them about their residency program, about union, and who the union, who handles the nursing union at that facility if they have one, who you can speak to about that. So you want to have those list of questions ready for you.
Also, Larry, you can also look on their websites. I know that our facility has a section on our public website just for residency programs, so it tells them about that. There's also national programs that hospitals can be a part of for residency programs, and they have a listing of, I know that the program that we're involved in has over 500 hospitals nationwide, and it's listed on their site to let them know what hospitals have that residency program. So there's other avenues to be able to find that information also on the internet.
Once you get the go to take the NCLEX, is it true you need to schedule it within 30 days?
There is a time limit for taking NCLEX, but at present that has been suspended because they know that not all testing centers are open. They can't offer as many tests because of social distancing and some of the measures they have to have in place. Part of the reasons why they cut down on the time of the test too is to try to get more people into test as best they can. So the current expiration dates have kind of been waived. So there were people that did have tests scheduled when they closed all testing in mid-March. They still have that authorization to test those. So that is an unknown. As of now, it's kind of been suspended in terms of the limits, but that could change at any time through the National Council of State Boards of Nursing and through Pearson VUE, who handles the testing and the scheduling. So I would encourage you just to be at the ready. I would also encourage you, if you are looking to talk to somebody at Pearson VUE about some of these questions you may have specifically in terms of getting ready to take NCLEX, set yourself a large block of time because you are going to be on hold for a long time trying to get to a person because they are pretty busy at this time. So I would recommend that you set yourself a good hour to 2 hour block of time if you actually want to call them to ask specific questions.
How soon is too soon to take the NCLEX?
If you think you are ready, no time is too soon. And some other people may want to chime in here too, but if you feel like you're ready, you've been doing practice tests or you've been using whatever materials out there like an ATI, a Kaplan, a HESI, and it's given you the green light to go and you get a test date, I would say go. Because we do know that the longer people wait, which is also what concerns me about people potentially pushing off NCLEX until they have been working for a while based on some of these state protocols, is that we know that people that wait longer do not perform as well. First time pass rate goes down significantly once you get past 3 months and then 6 months after graduation. So if you think you're ready, no time is too soon, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. This is Michelle. I agree completely. We've noticed the same thing where schools have encouraged people to wait longer and they're not passing as well. So as soon as you think you're ready, absolutely. I agree.
Is New York doing temporary licenses for new grads?
New York, I'll speak and then I'm going to ask Vincenza and Mary if they know a little bit about the hiring. But we do have in our Nurse Practice Act a provision for temporary licensure within the New York City area, and that spans a little past the actual city, going into Long Island and even some into Jersey or north. You would not be hired without the license first. So even though that provision is in the Nurse Practice Act, you would not be hired without that license. I wish I had an answer. I don't know if Vincenza or Mary do about the reality here if they are taking people. I have read some stories in some of our hospitals in Brooklyn and other places of some new grads that have started right away on a temporary license, but I do not know how commonplace that is. And that's going to be very facility based. As Michelle said, you want to know what your facility is doing. But Veronica, I'm sorry, Vincenza or Mary, do you have any thoughts on that?
As far as I know, the staff have to have a license. I'm not obviously, but I'm not sure as far as temporary license. The HR department is filtering through that.
What can you say about the modified NCLEX that will be implemented soon? Will it affect the competency of a newly graduate nurse since exam items were minimized?
So it's already in effect now, and it's going to be in effect until July 4th at present. They've actually done a lot of study. You can go onto their website and look. So from 2019. They went back and looked at some data in 2019. They went back and looked at actual individual tests and took out numbers of questions and found there wasn't that much difference, if any difference at all, in measuring competency. So the minimum's gone down to 60 questions, but in actuality, the minimum kind of has always been 60 questions because there were 15 new NCLEX questions that were actually being tested. That they were collecting data on. So out of that 75 minimum, there were actually really only 60 real questions to be able to pass or fail in that first group of questions. So the bigger thing is cutting off at 130 instead of 265. And they've actually, according to their website and talking to them, reviewed data from thousands of test takers and looked across all NCLEX competencies and did not see much difference if they had, say, rescored people last year at that 130 test item cutoff, how many passed and failed, it was basically equivalent. So the next interesting question is, might this change how NCLEX is done going forward? Since they're saying now that's all we need, why do we need to ever go back to 265 questions? We might be asking that in the future, but as of now, that's where we are.
Do you have any advice for new grads going through a temporary nursing job on the front lines as their first job?
I think this is Mary. I think as we kind of touched on earlier, it calls for a lot of flexibility and going in any time. And so this is just a new wave of challenges that we're facing. But I think giving yourself grace and taking time to take care of yourself outside of nursing will go a long way because we have chosen a challenging profession and it's dynamic and interesting and you will come to love it, but it may take a little bit of time.
What kind of past work experience might be useful to emphasize with prospective employers that would make me more attractive to hire during this pandemic?
Michelle or Vincenza or Mary, any thoughts on that? And then I can add my 2 cents in.
Sure. So, I think I can just speak for our institution. We're looking for still that caliber of nursing, that you're enthusiastic. So I think coming on board, just being passionate about working at an institution that you expect that there's changes, that you are, as Mary said, that you're flexible and adaptable, that you want to grow where everybody's growing. And I think that the same things that would stand, pre-pandemic, that things that you're proud of professionally, we're looking for that too, because right now we need strong people. Again, the clinical care is high caliber, and things are really evolving. So we're looking for that adaptability.
I would add to that too, a very wise woman once told me that she hired for culture, not for skill. So what kind of a person are you is what really matters to us. So sharing any kind of past experience where it shows what kind of a person you are, how flexible you are, how accommodating you can be, how you're a go-getter, how you accept challenges, anything within your previous experience that shows that that's what you want to do, because we want you to fit into our culture and we can teach you the skill, but I can't teach you to be a nice person.
Thanks, Michelle and Vincenza. I think that's excellent advice. And one thing for you all to remember is you are in the same boat as everybody else. And I know I said this earlier, but you're the one that's missed, say, your last 6 to 8 weeks of your clinical experiences or your capstone, your hands-on care. And everybody that is hiring knows that, knows what environment we're in, knows the healthcare system. So they truly understand that you haven't had a chance over, say, the last month or two before you get that job to do any hands-on psychomotor skills. And as Michelle said, they can teach you that. They can help you practice that. It is the flexibility and adaptability that Vincenza said. It is the culture, fitting in with the culture that Michelle said, that's going to be imperative. So anything that you can highlight that demonstrates your ability to accomplish any of those things is going to be essential.
Is there a place where we can find where new graduates are being hired? Despite the nursing shortage, the majority of open RN positions I've come across are requiring at least 1 year of acute care experience.
From a general standpoint, and then we can see if Michelle or Vincenzo or Mary have any specifics, but when this is all said and done, by the time COVID-19 winds down, I think we're going to see a vast change in our healthcare landscape. We have been educating nurses, and our model has long been kind of an acute care focus. The push has been that everybody needs to work as a nurse for a year or two in a hospital to see what it's like and understand how things are going forward. And I think that's kind of shortchanged a lot of our other areas in which nurses can play a huge, tremendous role, looking at community and public health, looking at issues that are going on in long-term care and in our long-term care facilities with this COVID pandemic and how they are totally unprepared to handle and manage it, and not their fault, but the system's fault. And so while you still may see some areas or some avenues that are looking for specific requirements, one of my things I always tell my graduates is, you know what you want to do, you should go out and do it. You know, if you want to be a psychiatric mental health nurse and somebody's telling you you should go work just in a hospital for 2 years before you specialize yourself, I'm one that says, no, you want to be a psych mental health nurse, you go do that. And I'm just using that as one example. So it's really hard for our new graduates, I understand, because you're hearing all different things from all different kinds of people. You need to follow your heart, because if you're following your heart, you're going to find the position where you are a good fit. As Michelle said, that right culture where you're going to like your job, they are going to like you, and things are going to work out better. That's not to say if you're looking long range and say you want to be a CRNA, you know, you do have a specific path you might need to take to do that. For example, trying to find that ICU or emergency room job to put you in that direction. You need to think about your long range planning as well in doing that, but please don't throw out your passions in terms of trying to look at what you're going to find. Are there going to be people that may have to accept a job that isn't 100% what they originally thought they wanted? That may be. I did that, and guess what? I ended up loving the neurosurgical intensive care unit that I worked in. It was my passion, and I loved every second of it, but it was not my original first choice. So that gets to the flexibility we talked about as well. And so that's kind of a broad pie in the sky answer to that. I don't know if any of our other panelists have some more granular answers to that question.
Ms. Michelle, all I would add to that is if you're looking for new grad positions, again, if you search for residency programs, they're accepting new grads because that's what goes into the residency program. So if you are having trouble finding jobs someplace that, just regular RN positions, search residency programs specifically for nurses, and you'll find the jobs for the new grads.
I heard a lot of January graduates are still in the process of getting a job, and that those applicants will be looked at before our class applicants get looked at. When should we expect to hear back or receive follow-up if we graduate this May?
I can leave that to our clinical folks that are on here. None of us are actually in the hiring realm. But yes, there are still December, January grads that may be looking for jobs at present. But we have this every year when our May graduates come around as well, that there is an overlap in the job search process. So there may be a slight delay in some, say, of our January or December grads taking NCLEX, as we've talked about. But this is actual normal overlap that we often see once our May grads begin looking for jobs. And so in terms of hearing, it is also person independent. So that resume and how you do in those initial screening interviews might not matter whether you were a January or December grad if you are successful in those avenues. So then it's going to be, personal presentation as well that's going to trump when you actually graduated.
And just to add to that, this is Vincenza. It may depend really at what institution, how often they onboard. At our institution, we have orientation monthly, but other institutions, they may do it every other month or every couple of months. We look at the pool pretty much generally. And if there's something that highlights you, no matter, if you graduated January or February, whatever it is, we look at the things that make you stand out. And when you are hired, the dates that you could start will be offered. So there's an opportunity that even though you are ready to go in March, if we need you sooner, you're able to start sooner, that there's the potential there because we offer orientation monthly.
I would add to that as well. This is Michelle too, that it just depends on the market as well. Like different areas, different parts across the country are doing different things. So we hire every 2 weeks when we're hiring people. So, it just depends, just like Vincenzo said, on the markets that you have. But I would also encourage you to use your networking skills. If you know people who work in facilities that you're interested in, ask them to, speak on your behalf, or ask, put them on your resume. And then, to know that people, and I know in the residency program, we expect to have a group of people coming out in January and in May. And so we already have people signed up who graduate in May, who we've already hired for June, a June residency start. So most of the facilities who have residency programs have that plan already in place. And we expect to have, we're hiring both from the January group and the May group.
And that's a great point, Michelle, that you need to think about the market where you are, and there are a lot of factors in play. So while some facilities may be swamped and in desperate need, there are other areas of nursing where we see, and healthcare, where we see providers being laid off because during a shutdown, some of these things have been shut down. So markets are very interesting right now and volatile. So it is important to try to do some research on your own to really understand what the job market is, where you are, and what your opportunities might be in the next few months.
Do you know if hospitals are extending orientation times for staff who are hired to a unit and now secondary to COVID are not seeing the patient populations they would originally see? Will they extend our orientation so we can learn about the population we had planned on seeing? Example, if we are in the PACU and we have ICU patients, but then once COVID is finished, will we be trained on only PACU patients?
So the short answer is yes, you will receive an orientation for the change in the clinical patient population. But as Mary mentioned, we've onboarded a lot of travel nurses. So even the staff that we're working with currently, that is going to change in the coming weeks. So your current orientation may look like 8 weeks long, and after 8 weeks, hopefully we'll be over COVID, and the patient population may look a little different. So you will continue to be oriented in that sense. It may just not be as formally set. So you'll still be working with somebody, but it just may not be like, okay, you have 3 weeks now. It may be, okay, you have a week here, a week there.
Due to the closing of testing sites, do you think it will be difficult to find a time to take the NCLEX after graduating, and should we expect to have a longer wait?
The expectation, that's a good question. I would say, depending on where you are, absolutely yes. Again, but these where you can take the NCLEX is constantly changing, which is why we can't even get an answer from Pearson as to where that is. So it really depends on sites and availability, and when you get that authorization to test. So some may not have to wait very long at all. It might seem a little more normal, whereas others, especially I would say maybe in some more rural states that don't have as many larger cities or areas of high density where they might have additional testing centers, might struggle or have to wait a little longer to find a time that they can test. It really is hard to directly answer that question, and it probably depends on where you are.
I am a new graduate with a passion in critical care. Would you recommend still applying for med-surg positions? Do you think they are holding off on hiring new grads in more critical settings?
That's an excellent question. This is Mary. We're actually finding that we're having higher acuity patients and in need who can take care of those patients. So the fact that you have a passion for ICU is wonderful during this time, and you should pursue it. Should the first position that comes up that's available to you be a med-surg position, I think go for it with the hopes of moving yourself up to an ICU level soon. But we are seeing that we need more nurses working in the ICUs, and we are hiring new grads directly to the ICUs.
I'd like, if I could add to that, this is Michelle. I agree with that. I mean, if you have a passion for ICU, that's where you want to go. But I do still encourage people, from my experience with we've hired a lot of people going straight into critical care areas, either the ED or the ICU, and they're being successful. But we're finding that they're more emotionally drained from it, because when you start on a med-surg unit, once you get comfortable, we find that they're getting more comfortable by 6 to 8 months, and they're feeling like they can get themselves into a groove. But then the ICU and ED nurses kind of feel like they're still constantly learning for a very long time of high-level critical care, for well over a year, and they're more emotionally drained. So you have to be able to have a lot of good support, and caring for yourself and having someone to help support you if you go directly there, because you'll need it.
What if I want to work in a nursing home? What should I be looking for? How does that look different than looking for a job in a hospital?
That is a great question. And as I said earlier, long-term care is an area of great need. And so they are in great need of outstanding nurses with great independence, I would say, great leadership skills, great organizational skills. The current state of long-term care is such that for my graduates that I know have gone into long-term care, there are not residency programs. We've been working with some people here around New York to look at developing some residency programs related to long-term care as well as ambulatory care like home health, because they don't really exist. As well as orientations. We find that since they're often so short-staffed, orientations are very short, and these nurses are often put in charge of large units very quickly. So as I said earlier, I think this whole COVID-19 pandemic is going to rethink how we look at long-term care going forward, and it's going to be essential that our global healthcare systems really review this and how we're staffing and how we're taking care of this population. So it is a tough area to start your career in as a nurse, if you want the honest truth. But we need people there, and if that is your passion, I applaud you. I do just want you to understand the realities and be prepared that it will not be easy. And all of those things that Michelle talked about earlier about yourself, that you need to prepare have your space to vent, your networks to talk to and assist with your emotional support and those kind of things are going to be critical.
How should we go about applying for a job during this pandemic work if we are at higher risk due to underlying medical conditions?
That is an excellent and very tough question. As we still have on the slide, advocating for yourself, and it's also thinking about your own safety and the safety of your family. There are a lot of options in nursing. Some of them that don't necessarily have to be face-to-face are hands-on. We are finding out now more about the importance of telehealth, telemedicine. Our nursing programs, unfortunately, don't do a tremendous job, some better than others, in teaching the tenets of telehealth to our graduates, our nursing graduates. There are opportunities for nursing professions that aren't as hands-on. As a new graduate, I personally can't give you any advice about how you might look at those kind of jobs if you are specifically concerned about your own safety in terms of having underlying conditions that might put you more at risk during this specific pandemic. But there are options out there. I don't know if our panelists have any other thoughts or ideas, but it is a very real question, but a very difficult question.
When is the right time to apply to my State Board of Nursing for the ATT?
If you are graduating this semester, you should have already been able to apply. If you're graduating in the summer, that I know for us, it's the very beginning of the semester that you're graduating. Each program may be slightly different, but you should be able to apply to the state. they don't then give you the authorization to test until your school, your grades post, your transcript is finalized, and that gets sent to the state where you're going to be testing, and that's when they approve and you get the authorization to test. But if you're about to graduate, you should have already applied, or you can apply now. So I would talk to your school as well, to your registrar, who usually handles that process, to see about going ahead and doing that application.
In several nursing programs, they have implemented design thinking in a variety of courses. Is this something that I should put on my resume?
I wonder if this is one of my students, but I would definitely put it on your resume. We do teach design thinking at NYU, just NYU Myers, for everybody out there. And design thinking is used a lot. And I sit on a curriculum committee, and they're actually teaching design thinking now in engineering programs, in business programs. The healthcare is moving more towards a design thinking kind of framework. So looking at thinking outside the box, looking at being able to identify problems and use outside the box thinking to address them quickly. And this COVID-19 pandemic has really demonstrated the need for quick, on your feet design type thinking. We're not in that phase now, but if you recall, we were in a huge worry about ventilators and crisis about ventilators, and there still are some areas that are having ventilator issues and shortages, but there were so many things that were tested and tried, and looking at converting other equipment and things that might or might not work, and that's the kind of thinking, honestly, that we need all the time in healthcare and in nursing. So I would definitely incorporate that on your resume.
How do you go about starting your nursing career when there are limited positions open for new grads, and specifically residency programs still have a strict GPA requirement regardless of the needs for RNs?
Michelle or Vincenzo or Mary, did you want to kick this one off? I personally don't have a great answer for that. I do know that some programs do look for kind of GPA requirements as a way of looking through a large number of applications they may be getting. Is it the be all end all? Not even necessarily in those instances. As Michelle said earlier, if you do have people that you know within systems, they can advocate on your behalf as well to try to assist with that. But there are some places that may still have a GPA requirement. There are a lot that do not, right? So it is making sure you're putting yourself out there for positions that you think you're a good fit for, and not necessarily ruling anything out because of some requirement such as a GPA. That doesn't mean that you have a great resume otherwise that might catch somebody's eye and get you that first interview that can get you in the door, right? So it's a very difficult question, and gets back to what Michelle said about the market. Every market is different in terms of job availability right now and the types of jobs that are available. So some flexibility on your part may be key as you're doing this initial job search. Michelle or Vincenzo or Mary, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging question to answer, and I mean, to put things into perspective, we do where Vincenzo and I work, we do have a GPA requirement at this moment. However, we've also since we don't know what the trajectory of COVID-19 is right now, we're trying to keep in mind of what our current recently hired 400 travel nurses. In the past month, we've had 400 travel nurses come on. And we don't know in 8 weeks' time when those travel nurses will be leaving, we don't know how many patients we'll have with long-standing COVID-related issues that will still need hospitalization. So at that time, anything could really change. So what stands today could be very different tomorrow. So challenging question to answer, but institutions like NYU where I work that have had a long-standing GPA requirement, that could be changing.
And then last question, as a new nurse, what should I expect orientation to look like?
So right now, this is Mary from NYU. Right now, our orientation is exactly the same. We have a handful of classes. Some of them are now virtual, but we do all of the same hands-on skills sets once you get into the hospital. And then once you hit the unit, the time frame is the same. What could be different is the unit where you end up. If it's currently functioning, orientation may be extended. Same thing for if you are going to a unit that transitions to a different type of unit, your orientation could be extended. But other than that, our orientations are essentially accomplishing the same things.
And just to add, this is Vincenza. When you come in, you'll be wearing a mask, so that'll look a little different. We disinfect when you're here with us, because you still need to complete competency and skills. So that has to be done in person. That is unchanged. When there's opportunity for something remote, we like our EPIC training, our computer training, that is virtual too. So it's not just in the nursing department. There's other departments where we've done things virtually.
All right. Thank you so much to our presenters today for all this great information. Sigma is grateful that you took the time to share with this audience and look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Just a reminder to our attendees, please submit the state or country in which you live in the questions feature. And thank you to our attendees for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.